In this video, we take you through setting up a public calendar with registration provided by FormAssembly. Public-facing form on my screen is what we're setting up today. We do it in 4 steps. 1, create the FormAssembly form. 2, creating a formula field in Salesforce to link them. 3, setting up Experience Cloud with the public-facing calendar. And finally, configuring the public calendar settings. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is prepare our FormAssembly form. We're going to set up a simple FormAssembly registration form. Now, FormAssembly is a great product that lets you provide web forms that connect to Salesforce in really complex ways. And in this form, we're setting up a pretty simple one. We're just asking our registrants for their first name, their last name, their email address. And we're making this a generic course registration so that we can feed in information about the course that they're registering for from multiple different links on our public calendar. So this actually is going to be used at the end to bring it all together, but to prepare our video, we need to prepare this first. So we're setting our field, the course you're registering for, we're going to actually pre-fill that. And then the last thing that we want to do is add a hidden field that captures the course ID for the course that this person is registering from. So this form is going to be launched from the public calendar. When someone clicks on a session, they're going to be sent here to register for their course. With FormAssembly, you have to set up connectors. That means either bringing data from Salesforce or pushing data back into Salesforce. We're first going to set up a prefill connector. This is so that we can pass information from the RollCall public calendar to FormAssembly. We're going to be passing the course ID so that we can capture what the individual is registering for. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to actually look for the course. If you're using RollCall with anything that hits the API, remember that the RollCall objects start with HCARC, or we call it HCARC. And here we're going to say, we want you to go find the course based on a parameter that we're passing in on the URL. So we're not going to bother to encrypt this for this demo, and that's why it's considered an unsafe parameter. But in this case, it's not something that we really need to protect. So we're just going to grab the record ID from the course record. Of course, this is just the course ID. And then we're going to grab the course name so that we can show the person what they're registering for. So that's all we want to pull in from Salesforce when someone clicks on a calendar link. Now we're going to go and process what happens when you save the record. So once someone fills in their registration, we're going to push some data back into Salesforce. And in this case, we're wanting to look up the contact to see if they already exist in Salesforce. We don't want to duplicate their record. We also are going to look up their enrollment record, so their course enrollment record from RollCall. And again, we're not going to want to duplicate it, so each of these steps we're first going to search by the information we have in the form, and then we're going to decide if the record doesn't exist, we're going to create a new one. Otherwise, we are going to use the record that was found. So in this case, we're using the email and the first name to determine whether the contact matches. Of course, in your circumstance, you would choose whatever makes sense for your actual Salesforce instance. And now we're just mapping the fields for the registration into the contact record so that if we do need to create a new contact, we have all of the information we want. So our next step is we're going to look up the course enrollment. Now the course enrollment is the connection between a student, which would be in the contact record, and the course. We have the course ID in hand from when the student clicked on the calendar event, and we have now the student ID in hand because we looked them up in the step above. So keep in mind that none of this is really actually roll call. Of course, this is all custom using FormAssembly, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things that you can do using tools to help people register for courses that you supply through RollCall. So in this case, what we want is for a student to be enrolled immediately as soon as they hit submit. So in our example, we aren't charging for classes or anything like that. We just want to enroll someone. And so if you were doing this for real, you would probably want to put some restrictions in place around whether the course still has any seats. You may want to do some, capture certainly some additional data, and that sort of thing. But really, we're just trying to get to an example to show you how you could use these public forums. So now that I've done that piece, I have the information that I need to move into Salesforce and customize the session object. So what we're doing here is we're laying the foundation for the public-facing form. I'm going to create a formula that links each session to this registration form. And so this is going to return text, and we're just going to paste in that URL that we've got from FormAssembly. And we're going to go and copy the pre-fill connector, the URL parameter that we set up, just so we don't get it wrong. And so that we don't make any typos, because it has to be exactly the same, or otherwise FormAssembly won't know what we're sending it. And so that's always going to be the same for every session and every course. And what differs is the course itself. So even though this formula is on the session record, which is what appears on the calendar, we want to link to the course because we're enrolling the student in the course. And so here's our registration link, and now when we click on it, you can see that it doesn't get an error. It went and found the course that we want to register for. And so we're just going to test this out and make sure it all works before we do the final steps to connect it to the calendar. So I filled in my form. I'm going to go look at my roster, and when I either try to take attendance on a session in the future, or when I reload the page, we're going to see that Jen Test Taylor is here available for attendance tracking and will be on the student roster. So our public form worked. So that's great. We have all of the pieces in place now that we need to bring it all together in a public form. We have a thing for someone to do when they click on the calendar. We have a confirmed, we've confirmed and tested that it works to enroll in the course. And now we're going to go into Salesforce's Experience Cloud builder. We already set up an Experience Cloud environment. And what we're doing here is we're dragging in the Visualforce page called RC Public. This is the new public calendar that comes with RollCall. And we're just making it 1500 pixels tall so that it's nice and big. This is going to be the month view by default. We're making sure we put it on our home page in this example, and we're making sure that the page that we put it on is public. So with Experience Cloud, you can either force people to log in, or you can set some of the pages as public. So this is all we're going to do. We hid the header. We just want the calendar to show up. You could wrap this in anything that you want, really, and make it your own. But the key is embedding that RC public. And now we are setting up and confirming the guest profile permission. So this, again, is not part of RollCall. This is really part of learning to set up a public Experience Cloud. But we're just going through the steps here so that you can see, in order to display the public calendar, the guest user for the site must have read access on courses, and the fields should be available. the relevant fields should be available for them. They also must have read access on sessions. So you can see here we had read enabled, but our important registration link that we just set up a few minutes ago wasn't yet visible for the guest user. So we're going to save that. The other things that the guest user needs to be able to display a public calendar are the Visualforce page, HCarc4 RC public. Just make sure that that's available, and if it's not, add it. And also Apex class, the HCarc4 RC controller. So once your guest user has access to all of the RollCall underpinnings, the last thing you need to do is actually enable sharing visibility for that guest user. So even though they have visibility, they can't see any records without the sharing rules. Sessions are a child of course, and sessions are controlled by course visibility. So you want to do a new course sharing rule, and you want to make the courses public that makes sense for you. So you want to do this as guest user access, and we've chosen to only display where the course status equals planned. The only thing you can do for the guest sharing is read only, and that's all we need. We just need to display this. The FormAssembly is actually handling any data input, and our public calendar is just doing read-only display. So now that we have all of the pieces in place, we're going to grab this URL for our public site. And since we made the home page where our calendar is embedded, here we go. Here's a blank public calendar, because none of our courses are currently meeting the criteria to be displayed to the public. So even though we do have several courses set up, none of them are planned, they're all in progress. So let's go ahead and set up a brand new course. We'll just do some advanced knitting circle. And all we're doing here is just setting up a RollCall course that conforms to the rules that we just set up in the sharing. So you can see course status is planned. This is in the future, and so it's still fair game for someone in the public sphere to be registering for. We're just going to do our setup just like we always would. There's no difference. This is the same data. Notice I've got my admin screen, so I have both the 24-hour and the 12-hour time visible, but this is a 12-hour time setup, so I'm just going to put these as 3 p.m. And of course, when we save it, it sets up our schedule, because there's no difference in setting up a public calendar. Now we're going to go back to our public calendar and reload it, and you'll see that now we have some sessions on the calendar. By default, clicking on a session in a RollCall calendar takes you to the session page, which isn't visible in our community and isn't what we want. Instead, for the public page, we want someone to click on that registration link that we set up at the start of this video. So we're going to go into custom metadata, into RC configs, which is where all of the RollCall configuration is stored. And we're going to look for the configuration that says calendar public or public calendar. So most of them are grouped towards the bottom. They say public calendar click field, public calendar click open in new tab, etc. We want the click field. This is referencing the formula field that we set up at the beginning, that we're going to go and just grab the API name off of the session. So remember, this is what we set up to route over to the registration form that we set up in FormAssembly. This can be anything you want. It can go to your website. As long as it's a field that returns a URL, you're good here. You can also, by default, it's going to open in a new tab. The other things that we can control are the header color, the text color, and the field for sort if you don't want it to sort by time and then by name. And so we've got this blue header here with some white text. I'm just going to go and turn that orange in our custom metadata. So this is the public calendar header text. That should still be white, and then the public calendar header color. We're going to turn it orange. You can put hex values in here if you prefer, or just use the words. Now we're going to go reload our page, and it's going to have our custom settings all set up. We're going to see that orange header, and now when we click on the session, it's going to take us over to the FormAssembly form for Advanced Knitting Circle. That's through that course ID we're feeding in at the URL. I'm going to go ahead and register myself. This is going to make sure that I'm not duplicated. So it's going to still have just one person. We're going to just go and show you here that there's no enrolled students in Advanced Knitting Circle. So when we hit submit, it goes off and does its thing. Now it can take just a second to show up in Salesforce. So if we refresh this, we're not going to see anything. So we're just going to jump over to proof that we've got Jen Tess Taylor on our attendance and give it a second to show the newly enrolled student. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and please reach out if you have any questions.